Underneath the surface of every interaction, there's an energy exchange. And in relationships, especially the romantic ones, the one who fears losing always surrenders more than they should. You can smile, you can nod, you can say you're fine, but your fear leaks through every little behavior. She notices when your messages are too quick, when your tone shifts the moment she becomes distant, when you cancel your plans just because she hinted she might be available. And the worst part, she doesn't even need to be cruel. All she has to do is observe. You're already doing the damage for her, because fear, especially the fear of abandonment, has a scent. It's primal, it's ancient, and women, whether consciously or unconsciously, have evolved to detect it. Not because they are malicious, but because they are wired to feel attraction towards certainty, power, and leadership. When a man emits anxiety, when he radiates emotional neediness, she may not be able to name it, but she feels it. And slowly, that feeling starts to erode her respect for him. It usually starts with something small. She doesn't respond to your message as quickly as before. You wait, you wonder, you check the phone again, and then you send a follow-up. Maybe something light, maybe a joke, but she doesn't answer. You spiral. You tell yourself you're just trying to keep the conversation going. You don't want to seem upset, but in truth, your fear is screaming through your fingertips. You need her to reassure you. You need her to validate that she still wants you. But what you don't realize is that every time you act out of fear, you're giving her the power to decide how you feel. And she's learning, without ever asking for it, that she controls your mood. That realization changes everything. It shifts the balance of the relationship in a way that rarely returns. You become the one waiting. She becomes the one choosing. And this isn't just about messaging. It's deeper. It's when you apologize for things you didn't do wrong just to keep the peace. It's when you over-explain your intentions, thinking if you just clarify yourself enough, she'll understand and come closer. It's when you rearrange your life to fit her unpredictability, believing that if you're flexible enough, loving enough, accommodating enough, she'll stay. But love doesn't respond to desperation. Respect doesn't grow in a field watered by anxiety. And what's most brutal is this: the more you fear losing her, the more likely it becomes that you will. Because nobody wants to feel like they are the sole source of someone else's stability. It's not romantic, it's suffocating. Let's take an example you've probably seen before. A man dates a woman who seems to be out of his league. He becomes hyper-vigilant. He tries harder. He double-texts, he overpays. He showers her with attention, not because he's generous, but because he's scared. Scared she'll realize he's not enough. Scared she'll find someone better. Scared she'll leave. And she will. Not because of who he is, but because of who he becomes under pressure. He stops being a man. He becomes a mirror, always reflecting what he thinks she wants to see, instead of being rooted in who he truly is. And she senses that, the way animals sense weakness, the way leaders sense submission. This isn't about manipulation, it's about energy. The moment you fear losing someone more than you value keeping your dignity, you begin to shrink. You start tiptoeing around their emotions, waiting for cues, adjusting your volume, censoring your truths. And the sad irony is, in trying so hard to keep them, you become someone they no longer want. You see, women are not turned on by perfection, they're turned on by presence. By a man who knows what he stands for, by someone who can say no without flinching and mean it, by someone who would love to have her, but does not need her to feel whole. That's not arrogance, that's centered masculinity. But the man who fears, he apologizes too often, he gives too quickly, he explains too much, and every one of those actions, though dressed in kindness, is rooted in terror. Not love, terror. And you can't build attraction on terror. You can't inspire respect with panic. When she realizes you're more afraid of losing her than she is of losing you, the game is over. Even if she stays, something dies. The part of her that looked at you with admiration starts to fade. the polarity dissolves, the chemistry dulls, and eventually so does the connection. If you want to reclaim your position, you have to start by examining your own fear. Ask yourself, what exactly am I afraid of? Being alone? Being rejected? Being forgotten? And then ask, why do I think her presence solves that? Why do I believe she's the cure to a wound I've never tried to heal myself? Because when a man fears losing her, it's never just about her. It's about his own emptiness. She just became the symbol of what he thinks will fix it. But that's not love. That's dependency dressed in romance. That's emotional servitude disguised as devotion. And the truth is, she feels it. Even when you don't say a word, there's a reason silence hits harder when she pulls away. It's not just the absence of her voice, it's the flood of your thoughts in her place. You start filling in the blanks. You convince yourself you did something wrong. You imagine her with someone else, and now, not only are you afraid, you're fantasizing your own humiliation. And all this while she might not even be thinking about you. That's the imbalance. That's the danger. You've given her the keys to your mind, and she didn't even ask for them. And once she knows you're afraid, once she sees the cracks, she may never fully trust your strength again. Because even if you try to act composed later on, she remembers the moment you broke, the moment you begged, the moment you lost your frame. And in her mind, that becomes who you are, forever. So the next time you feel the panic rising, the urge to chase, to please, to fix, pause, breathe. Ask yourself if your next move comes from fear or from power, because only one of those paths leads to respect. The other leads to silence, cold, brutal, empty silence. And she knows exactly what that silence does to you. There's a kind of control that doesn't need threats, doesn't need shouting, doesn't need ultimatums. It doesn't even need her to speak. It thrives in silence, in glances, in subtle changes in energy. And when a woman realizes that your greatest fear is losing her, she doesn't have to raise her voice to dominate the entire relationship. She simply withdraws her attention because she knows that's enough to unbalance you completely. When someone knows your weakness, they don't have to press it, they just have to hover near it. And that's the reality of emotional control. It doesn't always come from aggression. It often comes from observation. She watches the way your posture shifts when she's cold. She sees how fast you try to fix things when there's tension. She notes the way you stumble over your words trying to be understood. And over time, she doesn't need to argue anymore. All she has to do is go quiet, and you do the rest. And that's the trap you don't even realize you're falling into. Because fear creates a blueprint of behavior. It makes you predictable. It turns your desire into desperation. And once your actions become easy to anticipate, they become easy to manipulate. Let me give you a picture you won't forget. Imagine you're playing chess against someone who has already seen how you move under pressure. She knows that when she moves her queen in a certain direction, you'll instinctively try to protect your king. She knows your defense mechanism. She knows when you'll sacrifice a piece just to keep the game alive. Even if you're losing it slowly, you keep playing. But it's not because you think you'll win. It's because you're afraid of what it means to stop. That's what a lot of men are doing in their relationships. They're not loving. They're surviving. They're not choosing. They're reacting. And because of that, they're not respected, they're tolerated, barely. You may think your consistency will win her over, that showing up every day, being available, being emotionally open, being generous with your words will make her see how valuable you are. But if all of that is rooted in your terror of her walking away, she doesn't see love, she sees strategy, and not the strong kind, the kind that's desperate for approval. That's when she starts testing you. Not always on purpose, but instinctively. She pulls back just to see what you'll do. She mentions another guy just to measure your reaction. She criticizes you slightly more just to watch your posture bend. And when it works, when you flinch, when you apologize, when you try harder, she knows she has the upper hand. And the worst part is that she doesn't even have to think about it. It becomes her default setting because humans don't respect what they control too easily. Here's the paradox no one talks about. The more you're afraid to lose her, the more you lose yourself, and in the process, you lose her respect. You stop leading the emotional dynamic. You become a responder. You wait for her signals, you wait for her moods, you wait for her to say it's okay, for you to feel stable again. And that's the most fragile place a man can be. Women may be drawn to emotional availability, but they are repelled by emotional instability. And when your affection feels more like a performance than a presence, she can feel that too. She can tell when your kindness is just a shield for your fear, when your compliments are fishing lines for reassurance. When your "I just want you to be happy" is really "I just don't want you to leave." This doesn't mean you shouldn't care. This doesn't mean you should be cold. But there is a monumental difference between presence and panic, between connection and codependence, between love and fear. If you want to shift the power dynamic, you have to stop being afraid of her silence. You have to become a man who can withstand uncertainty, who can sit in discomfort without jumping to fix it, who can hear "I need space" and not spiral, who can feel her pulling away and not chase, but stand. Because in those moments, she's not just watching your reaction, she's re-evaluating your essence. She's asking herself, is he a man who holds his ground, or a man who loses himself every time things aren't perfect? This is where true masculine strength is forged. Not in how loud you are, not in how many flowers you buy, not in how many times you say, "I love you," but in how calmly you hold your frame when things get tense, in how clearly you speak your truth, even when your voice shakes, in how you stay rooted, not because she told you to, but because you've learned to stop begging for connection from someone who enjoys the power of withholding it. One of the most powerful things you can do is recognize the pattern before it consumes you. The moment you feel the urge to over-explain, to over-validate, to prove yourself, pause. Ask, am I doing this because I'm secure or because I'm scared? That question alone could save you years of emotional self-destruction. Because when she sees that her silence no longer unravels you, that her distance no longer drives you into a frenzy, something shifts. You become unfamiliar. You become unpredictable. You become interesting again. Not because you're playing games, but because you're no longer playing hers. This is how you reclaim your power, not by trying harder, but by letting go of the need to be chosen every second, by choosing yourself again and again, until she realizes the person she thought she could lose at any time might be the one who could leave first. And the moment she feels that, everything changes. Once you stop reacting to the threat of abandonment, something curious happens. You begin to notice how much of your behavior was never actually yours. It was fear, disguised as personality. The way you used to laugh too loudly at her jokes, the way you'd text her first every time, even when she clearly left you hanging. The way you'd compromise on things that mattered to you because you were afraid she'd label you too difficult. Fear is subtle like that. It doesn't shout, it whispers in your choices. What most men don't realize is that the way you show up emotionally sets the terms of the relationship from day one. If she senses, even slightly, that her approval dictates your mood, your confidence, or your sense of worth, she now holds a lever over your psyche. Not because she's evil, not because she's manipulative, but because that's how human dynamics work. Power fills the gaps that insecurity creates. The person who is least afraid to walk away holds the most influence. It's not a game, it's a law. Emotional detachment is often mistaken for cruelty, but in reality, it's often a form of psychological discipline. The ability to stay present without depending on the other person to make you feel valuable is not cold, it's powerful. Let me illustrate this with something you've seen 100 times but never paid attention to. Have you ever watched how children test boundaries? They'll push a little, wait for a reaction, then they push harder. If the adult gets flustered or gives in, the child now knows exactly what it takes to gain control. Relationships work the same way. The more you respond with anxiety when she pulls away, the more she realizes she can push you without consequence. And it becomes a cycle. She creates space, you collapse into it. Now imagine doing the opposite. Imagine observing the silence instead of chasing it, letting her take space without offering 20 explanations or emotional declarations. That doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you stop broadcasting it like a man who's negotiating for his own survival. You begin to embody a different energy, calm, grounded, enigmatic. And that's where mystery is born. We often associate mystery with manipulation, but it isn't about hiding who you are. It's about not handing your entire emotional blueprint to someone who hasn't earned it. It's about allowing your silence to speak louder than your words. When she doesn't know how you'll respond, not because you're playing a role, but because you're no longer addicted to her validation, she starts to recalibrate. This recalibration is subtle at first. She may test your boundaries in new ways. She may pretend not to care, hoping you'll slip back into your old patterns. But when you remain unfazed, when your energy doesn't shift to match her drama, she starts to question the dynamics. She begins to wonder if she overestimated her hold on you. And in that questioning, the power balance begins to shift, not because you demanded it, but because you refused to beg for it. Here's the irony. The less afraid you are of losing her, the more magnetic you become. Confidence is not loud. It's not cocky. It's quiet. It walks into a room and doesn't need to explain itself. And in romantic dynamics, it's lethal. Not because it hurts, but because it seduces from a place of self-respect. The truth is, many men were taught that proving your love means showing vulnerability all the time. That being open, available, responsive at every moment is the right way to love. But that's only half the equation. Vulnerability without boundaries is self-sabotage. Openness without posture invites exploitation. You don't become strong by shutting down. You become strong by choosing who deserves your softness. And here's what they won't teach you in therapy or in self-help books. Sometimes your anxiety about being left is not trauma. It's clarity. It's your intuition screaming that you're in a dynamic where your value is only recognized when you're suffering. And instead of healing that wound by becoming even more available, maybe the healing comes from withholding, from not showing up to the altar of her silence with offerings she didn't ask for. Let me give you a practical tool. Next time you feel the urge to overextend, to explain, to chase, pause and write down what you wanted to say. Sit with it, look at it, and then ask yourself, if I said nothing, would I still respect myself? Because sometimes the most powerful message you can send is the one you don't deliver. The strength is not in the action, it's in the restraint. Your presence should feel like a choice, not a transaction, not something you offer hoping to be accepted in return. And if she only responds when you're at your most desperate, then you already know you were never in a relationship. You were in an audition, and you've already earned the right to walk off that stage. There's something deeply humiliating about realizing that your own affection is being used as a leash, not through words, not through violence, but through silence, through her calculated distance, through the strategic pauses between your message and her response, through the cold eyes that once held warmth. And the worst part is, she never says it. She never admits the game. She just lets you fall deeper while she keeps the ladder to herself. When a woman knows you're afraid of losing her, she doesn't need to raise her voice. She doesn't need to fight. She just needs to stop giving you the signals that used to make you feel seen. Suddenly, her laughs are quieter, her replies are shorter, the compliments stop coming. And when you ask if something's wrong, she says, "You're imagining things, but you're not. Your instincts are right. You just don't want them to be." This kind of control is invisible because it doesn't wear a name. It's not abuse, it's not betrayal. It's something softer, more elegant, more deadly. It's passive power. And the ones who suffer under it are not weak men. They're emotionally invested men who haven't learned how to withhold yet. Men who believe love should always be proven. Men who confuse sacrifice with strength. But here's the truth. The more she senses that your biggest fear is losing her, the less she needs to respect you. Because from that point forward, the entire relationship is no longer built on mutual interest. It's built on your fear of abandonment. You stop being a partner and you become a volunteer. And what's offered freely, without discernment, is rarely valued. Now look around you. You'll see the pattern everywhere. The guy who used to be confident now waits for her mood to decide his day. The one who used to have a strong sense of purpose now rearranges his schedule to chase her attention. And all she has to do is withhold affection. That's the entire strategy. She doesn't even have to try hard. Your own mind does the rest. That's why emotional independence is not a luxury, it's survival. You need to remember who you were before her validation became your currency. You need to remember what your silence used to sound like before it became filled with fear. Most men don't lose themselves all at once. They lose themselves in fragments, in small compromises, in tiny hesitations, in moments where they say yes, when everything inside them screamed no. Let me show you something different. Imagine that she pulls back and you don't chase. She leaves your message on read and you go for a walk instead of staring at the screen. You feel the discomfort. You don't run from it, but you also don't try to fix it. You let her absence echo without trying to fill it. That's the shift. That's the moment you stop being predictable. And suddenly, she's no longer in control of your emotions. She might not say it, but she'll feel it. The next time she sends a vague message, expecting you to lean in, she'll notice the delay. The next time she withdraws, she'll wonder why you're not pulling harder. She'll begin to question your attachment. And in that questioning, her power starts to dissolve. The goal is not revenge, it's not manipulation, it's emotional recalibration. You're not teaching her a lesson, you're reminding yourself of your own value. And that value doesn't live in your ability to hold the relationship together with one-sided effort. It lives in your ability to walk away when your presence becomes invisible. You've probably heard the phrase, when you stop caring, she starts chasing. But it's not about pretending not to care. That's performative, and they can smell it from miles away. It's about genuinely anchoring your self-worth outside of her reaction. Because when your peace no longer depends on her affection, she loses her ability to disrupt it. This is where most men fail. They try to fake detachment, but inside, they're still crumbling. They still want her text. They still need the approval. That's why this isn't about surface behavior. It's about internal transformation. You don't win this game by acting colder. You win by becoming warmer with yourself, more aligned, more still. So next time you feel like sending that message just to remind her you exist, don't. Next time you want to explain why you're a good man, don't. Next time you think showing her how much you care will finally make her see your worth, stop. Your value is not in what you give to someone who isn't asking. Your value is in what you withhold from those who don't deserve it. And as you begin to master that restraint, a new kind of power enters your life. One that doesn't beg, one that doesn't explain, one that simply is. The kind of power that shifts the dynamic without needing to raise a finger. The kind that makes her sit with the silence she once used against you and realize it no longer works. You've stopped being the emotional charity case. Now you're the prize she has to re-earn. There's a moment every man reaches when the silence no longer hurts, but liberates. It doesn't happen immediately. At first, the silence is unbearable. It feels like rejection, like abandonment, like a personal failure carved into your chest. You overthink every detail. You rewind conversations in your head trying to figure out where it went wrong. You wonder if you texted too soon, too late, too much. If you were too honest, too emotional, too available. But eventually, something shifts. You start to see her silence for what it really is. A mirror, not a reflection of your worth, but of your own addiction to external validation. You begin to understand that she's not holding back because you're unworthy, but because you gave her all the power without requiring any effort in return. That's where the game ends, and your life begins. Because this isn't about her anymore. It's about the man you become when you finally stop being terrified of emotional loss, when you stop fearing that her absence will unravel you, when you stop negotiating your value with people who never made an offer. You see, every time you bend to keep someone who doesn't choose you, you reinforce a dangerous message to your subconscious, that love must be earned through sacrifice. And that's a lie. Real connection is not a performance. It's a resonance, a mutual energy that doesn't require you to beg, explain, or suffer, but it takes time to unlearn that. Especially if you were raised to believe that being a good man means being endlessly patient, forgiving, and emotionally available, even to those who never asked for your heart, but didn't mind using it as a cushion for their loneliness. So let's flip the script. What if your value wasn't tied to her reply? What if your silence was not a passive reaction, but a powerful strategy? What if you started showing the same discipline in love that you show in your work, your goals, your mindset? Think of it like chess. The best players don't just move pieces, they set traps. They calculate 10 moves ahead. They know when to sacrifice a pawn to protect the king. In emotional relationships, your king is your self-respect. And if you keep throwing away your pieces just to keep her interested, you'll wake up in checkmate, wondering why you always lose. Here's where it gets deeper. When a woman senses you're no longer afraid of losing her, everything changes. Your energy shifts. Your presence carries weight. Your silence stops being weak and starts being magnetic. You become the man who can walk away, not out of anger, not out of ego, but out of clarity. And that's irresistible, because unpredictability creates value. When she can no longer predict how you'll react, when you'll text, or if you'll chase, she starts paying attention, not because you're playing games, but because you've stopped playing hers. Now she's the one analyzing, wondering, checking her phone, reading between the lines, noticing the void you left behind. This isn't about vengeance, it's about balance. Emotional equilibrium. You give what's matched. You invest where there's return. You withhold when there's withdrawal. That's how strong men love, not with desperation, but with discernment. You'll notice something else too. As you detach from her approval, your world expands. You have more time, more clarity, more mental bandwidth. You return to your own life, your ambitions, your goals, your discipline, and that inner alignment starts to reflect outward. Your posture changes, your voice deepens, your decisions become sharper. Suddenly, you're not just trying to keep a woman, you're building a life that she has to earn her place in, because the real power doesn't come from being wanted. It comes from being needed but not needing, from being desired but not desperate. From being able to feel love without drowning in it. Let her feel your absence. Let your silence echo louder than your words ever could. Let her realize that the emotional leash she thought you'd never break has snapped, and you're not looking back. She'll test you. She might send a casual message just to see if you bite. She might like your post, view your story, ask how you're doing. Don't fall for the bait. Don't misinterpret a breadcrumb as a meal. Stay grounded, stay centered, stay cold if necessary, but never cruel. Because indifference with elegance is more devastating than any insult. At this level, you're not looking for love from someone who tolerates you. You're waiting for the kind of energy that matches your depth. The kind that doesn't exploit your fear, but honors your strength. The kind that feels safe but never dull. That sees your heart but doesn't mistake your kindness for weakness. Because you've learned, you've suffered, and you've survived enough to understand that love is not something to be proven. It's something to be shared. equally. If she can't do that, she doesn't belong in your future. Not every woman who captures your heart deserves access to your peace. And now you know how to protect both.